right, folks, it's time for World Politics. I know I've got Nick Palveda with me, and of course, we'll see who else joins us as well. But I can tell you one thing that was going on today in the term of world politics. I actually had to do a presentation for HUD earlier today, so that was going on. So the Housing and Urban Development was here, and they had one of their secretaries here, and all along those lines, because they were talking about housing and some of the issues around housing, including with Section 8 housing. And there was one woman that was saying that she's been trying to get things in that space and was having a hard time even finding employment and jobs and dealing with the housing. And of course, she was also concerned about gang violence in her community and was saying that sometimes she had to end her meetings to get back home because she wanted to make sure that her 12-year-old was safe. Because I think she was a mother of five, and we may be having Regina come on one of these future shows and all along those lines. So it was interesting to hear those conversations and hear people talking about that and all along those lines. And I understand that even though I missed him, Tim Walsh was at the Duke campus earlier today. So he was here stomping for their ticket and all along those lines. And then I think he was going to Wimbledon. He might be going to some other cities as well. So that's definitely something that was taking place and all along those lines. So a lot of things are happening in the political landscape and along the political line. So we've always got things going on, whether it's in Israel, whether it's in Ukraine, or a number of other places as well. But I see we've got one of the founders with us, so we're going to bring him on and see what he's got to say about these things that are taking place. Maybe they've been campaigning in Utah. I doubt that very seriously because I think that is a heavily blue area from what I've heard and everything along those lines. But maybe they will still campaign because they've been, for some reason, Donald Trump is going to New York, even though that is seen as a heavy Democratic spot. So maybe some of these candidates are trying to pull all the stops out and go to places where they aren't favored as well. But hey, it's the middle of a race. Actually, a gentleman that is one of our Durham County commissioners, Stephen Valentine, and he was saying that he actually would not be surprised if it's not a toss-up and all along those lines, even though he's hoping that Kamala will win. He would love Kamala to win in a landslide, but he's also not very optimistic about that, and he's thinking that it could be a nail-biter. He's actually thinking that it could be one of the closest races of all times, and like I said, he is a lawyer, a veteran, and has been involved in a number of other things, and we might see him come on this show as well in the not too distant future. He said he wouldn't even be surprised if it went to the House of Representatives and it was decided there. Because, last time we had a contested election along the lines, so he's actually thinking that with the possibility that it could even head toward a House of Representatives making the decision for us. And who knows what goes on in that space. We also know some people are worried about the Electoral College and whether that's going to decide it. So there's all these moving parts going on in this election that is less than 2 weeks away, because it'll be a week from Tuesday will be the general elections, and there are still people doing early voting. I think early voting for us goes till next Saturday. So there are definitely some events here in Durham that are early voting oriented. There are events in Philadelphia, events in Atlanta, and a number of other places, as well as people are trying to mobilize their forces in order to get that vote out there and to see what can go on in that regards. So definitely it'll be interesting to see what goes on. So that way, apparently Harris called Trump a fascist. That was one of the takeaways from her CNN town hall. And definitely I think that was something that one of the generals had said as well. So apparently she dropped the F-bomb on a CNN town hall. And definitely, like I said, Waltz has been campaigning, and he was even here campaigning as well. And former GOP Representative Fred Upton backed Harris and said that Trump is totally unhinged. So definitely we got folks that are out there. I think that's a Wisconsin mayor, a former Republican who has come out and endorsed the whole notion of Harris. But Biden is set to apologize to the Native Americans for the Indian boarding schools. So Biden is expected to apologize for the federal government's role in Indian boarding schools. And definitely there's some folks that says that was forced assimilation and abuse. And definitely there are some folks that say that devastated many of the Arizona tribes and all along those lines. And like I said, in terms of some major stars, apparently Beyonce is expected to perform at a Harris rally in Houston, and I think Bruce Springsteen has either performed or will be performing and everything along those lines. And of course, Elon Musk is doing his $1 million voter giveaway, and there are some people that are wondering about the legality of that and all along those lines. So I think that we've got up to like 28 million votes. I think that there's a significant amount of people that have already voted. So definitely, I think they said 28 million have been cast.
It's more. It's more. It's 29.9 million plus another 3 that are in the mail and haven't been received yet. So we're over 30 million, which means the election is 20% over. One voter out of 5 who's going to vote has already done it.
Wow. Well, Trump said that he would fire Jack Smith within 2 seconds if elected. So he's already said that he would fire the special counsel if he's elected. And like I said, I was talking to this gentleman that he is predicting. I've heard different people predicting. Some people are saying it's already bought and paid for a Donald Trump victory. I've also heard some people, like I said, I was talking to a county commissioner here in Durham, and he was predicting that it could go to the House of Representatives and all along those lines. So it would be quite.
For it to go to the House of Representatives, it has to be tied. Each side has to get 269 electoral votes. The odds of that are less than 0.5%.
That I would agree. It's just not going to happen. You know, somebody's going to win, somebody's going to lose, and that's kind of the way it's going to be. And I don't know if the Donald has the authority to fire Jack Smith. I know he says a lot of things, but you know, firing public employees just because you're disgruntled doesn't. I'm not sure if he has that power, to be honest with you. You know, it's just like building the wall, and Mexico's going to pay for it. Yeah, right.
If you're a Democrat and you're looking for a hopeful sign, so 6 states track the gender of the voters.
Yeah.
And based on that, based on 8 million early votes cast so far, women are 55% of the vote, which is good for Dems because women favor Harris over Trump.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, everything will be made known on November 7th, so we'll know. Well, actually, it may not be, because the thing is, of all the extra ballots, it'll probably be pretty quick. It may be the following week before we know actually who won the election.
Yeah, it might be a week or 2 weeks later. Who knows? Maybe anyway that we know and everything. But there's an issue that is part of the election, but also is part of Canadian politics as well. So I'm going to toss this one to Sasha, because I know that sometimes he's not a fan of certain people like Trump, but I don't think he's a fan of Trudeau as well. And Trudeau has announced sharp cuts to Canada's immigration targets. So apparently they have targets as to what they can do. So Canada is to cut their immigration levels, which is a major reversal, Trudeau says. And definitely Miller, who's one of the people there in Canada, says they are listening to Canadians, and they've reduced the targets for permanent and temporary immigrants. So Canada is to reduce new immigration by 21%. That's a big, one in whatever. That's like almost close to 1 in 5 and everything. So what's your take on that? Because you've even been a fan of immigration for the United States, and I'm guessing a fan that you are an immigrant for Canada, but it sounds like they are trying to put some levels in that, Sasha. So is this something that the Canadians want, or is this another effort from Trudeau that people aren't wanting as much as he thinks?
I think that Trudeau is irrelevant in Canadian politics because his own party is asking him to leave. That with his baggage, they have no chances to be re-elected. So they're begging him to leave. Now he just claimed, I think yesterday, that no, he's not going to leave, he's going to stay. So one way or another, I think very soon we will see the end of his leader's obligation as the prime minister will be ceased and desist, and it was the end of the story. As the immigration is controlled, I think Canada has getting enough immigrants the way it is now. It doesn't need any more, and whatever they can get right now is enough for sure. My opinion about U.S. immigration is that U.S. immigration, they need many, many more immigrants as they're getting now. And by the way, I came to the conclusion that there is no difference between legal immigrants and illegal immigrants. You know, what's the difference? Nick, think about it. All legal immigrants, they pay their lawyers $10,000, and they processing the papers, they're waiting for 3, 4, 5.5 years, and they're getting in. Now, the illegal immigrants, they're doing all at once. They're not paying $10,000. But if you're going to look at, say, 5 years, 7, 10 years down the road, They will be in the same status. They will have jobs, they will buy cars, they will buy furniture, they will marry, they will have kids, and there will be no difference whatsoever. So the only really people who have to fight for legal immigration are lawyers. So let lawyers fight for it. Why
Well,
do we
I think that's being a little bit simplistic. See, part of it is
agree?
part of it is we actually do have quotas, and our quotas are not meant from Europeans because the Europeans aren't immigrating here, and we're overquoted from people in South America and from Latin America and from that space. The other problem when somebody illegally immigrants, becomes an illegal immigrant, they slap all the Americans in the face saying, I don't really care about your laws. I mean, that's just the way it is. I do believe we do need to reform this in spite of the fact they slapped us in the face. There are
Which
statute
way
of
they
limitations.
slap you in the face? What do you really mean?
Okay, it's like this. If I go to Canada and I say, well, I'm just going to stay around here because even though you guys have laws that say I must legally apply to be a citizen, I'm just going to camp out here and buy a place. So what I did is I slapped every person who tried to do it legally. It happened in our office in Bellingham where Priscilla, who was legally immigrating from South Africa, filled out all the paperwork, waited 10 years and get her citizenship. And she couldn't stand the people that, quote, skipped the line and said, hey, I'm here and deal with me. And so even the immigrants that come in here, just like me going to Spain, there are illegal immigrants in Spain. I'm going to obey the law. If I don't get my visa, which is quite possible, I'm coming back to the United States on December 10th. I even have a return flight. But what makes anybody mad is you have to fill out all this paperwork to come, and then you got a clown behind you goes, I'm just going to ignore it and come right in. And that's the slap in the face that all the illegal immigrants did to all the people in the United States. So one hand, I don't blame Donald Trump for saying I'm going to deport 11 million people. On the other hand, you have to be realistic. The cost of deporting is very expensive. Better to make them pay a fine or penalty and let them stay in the United States. That's just better policy, especially if they haven't broken any laws since then, and apply a reasonable statute of limitations. Currently, we have no one on either side who's speaking intelligently about the immigration problems in the United States. Yes, sir, Rick.
So I have a plan for Canada and for the U.S. Let all the immigrants into Canada you want, but you have to live more than 100 miles from the southern border. 90% of Canadians live within 100 miles of the U.S. because it's frickin' cold. But you want to be in Canada, then live in Yellowknife or Sawmill Bay or Port Radium and build those places out.
Yeah, they just won't do that. But we do need to get to a more realistic policy in the United States, and no one's really talking about it. We have to deal with reality of multiple failed administration on our immigration policy.
I mean, yeah, we need to vote on anything because we haven't been able to vote on anything.
Correct.
Because the Congress is paralyzed. But among the things we could vote on, like there's a deal where if you want your med school paid for, you can get it paid for if you agree to go to some horrible little town somewhere in the U.S.
Yeah, true. Or you go into the military.
Yeah. So if people want to come to the U.S., we could figure out probably crappy jobs for them. You want to come, then give us 2 years, 3 years working at working infrastructure.
A lot of them are already doing
building
quickly. The other thing I was going to add to that is that one of the complaints that's been out there for a number of years, I remember it even being out there 10 years ago, and you kind of alluded to it with your situation, Nick, is that there are countries that are seen more favorably than others, because that was the whole debate between Haiti and Cuba, because some people were saying that the Cubans got a quicker advantage in terms of coming here versus the Haitians and all along those lines. And even now we're seeing that there's a lot of gang violence coming from Haiti, so some people are concerned about those that are coming from Haiti, whether they're associated with the gangs or not. So it's not just a black-white thing, but sometimes it's a matter of class and other issues as well. So I just wondered, is that what we got to do, is figure out which countries are more favorable than others, or do we need to just because there used to be this
let Sasha go and then I'll go.
Let Sasha
in general.
I don't want to rain on your parade, but when Trump is dreaming about mass immigration from Europe, from countries like Denmark, for example, or France, Germany, or just name any European decent country, there will be no mass immigration to the United States because their level of life is much higher than in the United States. And even Spain, Nick, if you would agree with me, is a much more favorable place, especially for Spaniards, to live, raise families, get education, and so on. So the only people who would immigrate from Europe, from Western Europe, to the United States are very highly placed specialists who will, if they will come to America, they will fight for the best well-paying jobs. Otherwise, there's no reason for them to come to the United States. So unlike South American immigrants who will take any job in California, collect the fruits and vegetables, and just do any work, it doesn't matter. Now, 5 years from now, they will accommodate themselves and they will learn maybe some kind of trade or something else. So they will go into better jobs eventually. But at that time, there will be just American like any others. So this is much more fruitful, much better pool of immigrants which United States need. So get them all legal or illegal or both. Get as many as you can.
All right, here's Nick, you want, oh crap, I forget. But anyway, here's a way to link, well, housing. Kamala Harris says she wants to increase housing by 2%, 3 million new homes. So if we could pass anything, we could pass a thing like you want to come to the U.S., then you're going to spend 2 years becoming a carpenter and building homes. And, and the U.S. will subsidize this. At the end of 2 years, you'll know how to build stuff, and we'll have a bunch of new homes, and we'll have skilled labor eventually.
Right. Yeah, and see, Rick, that's a reasonable solution to the housing problem and the immigration problem, is putting the immigrants to work in something like housing. And I agree with Kamala Harris's, we need to build more houses. Absolutely. I disagree with this $25,000 gift or credit or whatever she's dreaming of. That's like lunacy. And that tells me that her advisors are pretty poor, because she doesn't come up with anything. It's her advisors, or I call them handlers, that came up with that incredibly. It's just like when Rick was doing jokes for Jimmy Kimmel. Rick, Jimmy Kimmel didn't do the jokes.
Hold on. Kimmel, of all the late night hosts, writes more of his material than just about any other late night host. That guy is a workhorse.
So he put a lot together. But what really was striking, this is the reason I did enjoy the debate that they had yesterday, is to be able to see other commentators discuss what their solutions would be to jobs, housing, immigration, and also be able to witness some people that were like completely off the wall, like the person from the Constitution Party. And I'm certainly that a certain amount of people will agree with what he says. And remember, that's part of the beauty of the United States. We allow lunacy.
Just really quickly, because me and Toby were speaking off air earlier and everything. Anybody that watched that debate, and two things. One, I think everybody here loves David Walker to death and everything, but he did look like a deer that had been run by deer lights, because the way they ran that debate, I don't think that he was prepared for it with the music and the entertainment and all along those lines. So I think that he was not expecting the kind of debate that they ran and everything. Maybe he was expecting it more than I thought he was. But even in our conversation, I've had this with other people as well. Can you name a solution that either Jill Stein or the gentleman from the Constitution Party or the gentleman from the Libertarian Party actually gave you, or was it a lot of hyperbole, which is the accusation that we've been given to the Democrats and the Republicans? So can anybody tell me something that they actually heard there was a physical solution, there was a proposal that they gave?
You mean something that was great that made you stand up and say, wow, what a good idea it was?
Yes.
No. And that's the sad part, Mark, because we have a lot of smart people in this country, and there's a lot of good ideas that could be propounded. One is something that even Rick brought up was, we have an immigration problem. We also have a housing problem. Use the immigration problem to solve the housing problem. See, that's actually a pretty good idea. Did we see anything from those three candidates? No, which was pretty disappointing. Yeah, Rick?
We did this in the 1930s, not with immigrants, but we had a Great Depression going on. And Roosevelt started the Works Progress Administration, which put, I don't know, probably millions of Americans to work on public. My high school was built under that program. It's a beautiful freaking high school. We built a ton of stuff. It put Americans back to work. It kind of goosed the economy. Really, what goosed the economy was World War II, but let's not do that again.
Well,
Yeah,
it's
and
one of the things that-
Sasha has something.
Yes,
I
Sasha,
have a question. Okay, so the idea is combine solve problems immigration and housing crisis. So the immigrants are coming, so they will be equipped with some tools or some other means, and they are going to build their own houses. But Rick, I think you mentioned that in Los Angeles presently there are 78,000 homeless people. Is that right?
Roughly that, 73, but yeah.
So why you didn't do the same with these homeless people? Here are the tools. Here is a place. Just go and build your own houses. Because they will never do it.
It's
They
because
are not interested to build the houses, their own or somebody else's house. They don't want to work. They don't want to build anything. So
Hold on,
these
there's-
people will stay homeless for another 55 years.
Well, there's a difference between, I mean, 1/3 of homeless are crazy. 1/3 of homeless
You're
have
mentally ill.
substance problems. 1/3 are people with bad luck. The bad luck people would probably love to do that.
Correct.
But there's
I
a
don't
difference between the immigrant, the people who come here, and homeless people. They're a different population. I
I'll
bet
tell
you.
you what. If somebody through bad luck or some circumstance, let's say he lost a house, he lost his business, he's bankrupt, and here somebody offers him, okay, there are tools, here is a piece of land, and go and start and build your own house. Yes, he would go and do it. But if he already was able to accommodate himself and used to be homeless for some period of time, I think anywhere from 2-3 years or 5 years, for sure, he's not going to consider anything to build something of his own.
Right,
He will
but
pay.
immigrants, you look at the favelas, look at the slum, like people in South America. Like there's a whole deal where you build your own house out of
Yeah.
whatever you can find, and so they would do it.
No, but hold on a second. We're missing a whole
I
issue.
agree.
We're
They
missing a whole
agree,
issue.
but
'Cause it was
not
actually,
our homeless
hold on a second, Sasha, because we're missing a whole issue because it was actually raised during the HUD talk that I did earlier today at the Haytime Heritage Center and everything. There is, because I partially, I hear what you're saying, Sasha, but I'm going to take you a little task with what you're saying because there is this lovely thing that even Nick talks about a lot called bureaucracy because there's a lot of people that would love to get housing. Matter of fact, there was a young lady there that's in Section 8 housing and is trying to get out of Section 8 housing, and she actually gave a long conversation about the problems that she was going through to get out of Section 8 housing and even find a decent job to help her get out of Section 8 housing. And so, but she's running into that bureaucratic red tape. So there's a lot of bureaucratic red tape that adds to this conversation as well. So you definitely got to figure out a way to
That's not what I was talking about.
Yeah.
Forget about red tape. It's everywhere and all. I'm talking about scenario where you already worked out on red tape. It's out of the way. So here comes, okay, here's a piece of land. Here are the tools. Let's go on and build your own houses. The immigrants, 99.9%, they will immediately, next day, they will be working very hard to build it because immigrants, when they're coming to country, and I don't care whether it's Canada or United States, they are full of energy. They want to succeed. They don't want to be on a third-rated jobs and going. They want to really succeed, and they do, most of them, probably all of them. Now, with the present homeless people, whether in LA or in Toronto, it doesn't matter where, they are unable to get out of that rut. Even if you will be larger. You need anybody, you will come and you will work very hard for 10 hours a day and you will build something for them. They will say, okay, we'll use it. But they have to pay rent also. They have to work. Also, they have to buy food. They have to do this and that. Say, you know what? Keep your house. We don't need it. We are happy.
Let's listen to Jacoby.
Yeah,
So I think what you're doing is placing all of the homeless into a box, which I think Rick pointed out. One, there's a lot of homeless that have mental issues. We're also taking away the context of why an individual ends up in the position they are. where a lot of the homeless end up being run down, being, basically that feeling of oppression that they had, that is a reality for them, where they've been attacked and demonized and beaten on. So just saying, well, you're late, you don't have any oomph or want to do anything. Well, after 30 years of being abused and beaten down and told that you can't do anything, and now you throw some tools at me and say build something, that's not going to work. So there has to be a different process, and we have to realize those things. Because, for example, how you're saying immigrants, and I get what you're saying, is that, oh, well, these immigrants come in and they'll build. Well, they don't have, again, they don't have that history that is there in this country that these homeless individuals have dealt with, and what has placed them into that homeless situation. So there are families out there that are homeless that, yeah, they're sitting there begging on the streets, and they'll do whatever just to get their family off the streets. There are others that will build. If you throw some tools and some wood on the ground, none of us on this screen, are going to go out and build a house. I hate to say it. Let's just being honest about each and every one of us here. None of us are just putting the tools together. It's a skill that certain individuals have, and certain individuals end up learning. There was a study, for example, in terms of the how we're attacking undocumented workers and taking those undocumented workers away from these jobs, because there's always this replacement theory that's there. Well, those jobs that a lot of these undocumented workers are doing are jobs that natural born citizens that are jobless won't even do. So they're doing certain things because there are certain situations that they're coming from in their history. So we can't just throw them all in one box and say, hey, they're just lazy.
All right, Sasha, then me.
Okay,
Yes,
unfortunately, I have to say something, that the job of the homeless people, it's a state of mind. I don't care whether they're really sick people who cannot do much about it, or they're healthy people. It's a state of mind, and to escape that is impossible. I'll give you an example from Deutsche Welle. It was an article which I read a few months ago about people who live in a trailers park in California. Okay, thank God, California is a warm place, so there is no problem physically staying in a trailers park. And what they had interviews with many people who stayed there. There were some people who had well-paying jobs, and yet they were like divorced, and they were sleeping in their cars because it's cheaper than to rent a trailer, for example. So they were getting by. They were not dying. They were getting by. They could feed themselves, but they were living a miserable lifestyle, and there was no prospects for them to get out of that lifestyle, so to speak. Now, we are talking about well-paid individuals who were getting paid like $75,000, $100,000 a year. But with this money, they could not rent a normal apartment, buy a normal car, and live a normal life. It's just impossible.
So
And
10% of the college students in California are housing insecure. They're kind of in their cars, they're on friends' couches, and those people are competent enough to go to college. They'd probably be competent enough to participate in some building program. But I have an idea. It's called Muskville. Now, Elon Musk wants 1 million people on Mars by 2050, which is ridiculous for a number of reasons. But he could test out the technology by hiring people to build a community in the desert and see if they could make it work, see if they could reclaim water. And we know he's got a bunch of money to do it because he spent $44 billion on Twitter. He's worth about $300 billion, and Twitter's now worth less than $10 billion. So he wasted $34 billion. He could waste a couple billion to see if a building program in the desert would work.
I see what you're saying.
Don't cry for Elon Musk. He didn't spend all his money on Twitter. There are a lot of Russian
All
millionaires
right, yeah, he spent Russia's
people who
money on it.
supplied more than enough money for him to get control of that platform and start breathing anti-democratic rhetoric and support Donald Trump or so on. So the Russians knew what they were doing.
So I hear what you're saying,
Interestingly
Sasha,
enough-
but Sasha and Rick, just really quickly, what would you do? And this is for everybody, including Jatopian, if Nick wants to jump in as well. Because one of the things that's come up on several conversations that I've been part of is this notion of the disparity in incomes, but also the way that impacts apartments. Because like even where I'm at here in Durham, that's where Jatopi's at, but I would say it's probably similar in California and other places. You can find some place that is a relatively affordable apartment for somebody, like that is willing to pay somewhere between $700 to $1,000. But then there are other apartments in the same area, and sometimes literally, as you know, Jatopia, right next to each other, that are going for $2,500 to $4,000 or something like that. So you got a disparity in incomes. And one of the things I was going to add to what you said, Sasha, is a lot of times the immigrants are coming here and they're coming in, they're willing to pay in interesting environments. Because even here, I don't think I've mentioned this on the show before, but one of the nicknames for Duke Manor is the Barrio, because there is a lot of people here that are of Spanish descent. Our leasing office is, I'd say, majority Spanish and everything like that. But even my next door neighbors, one upstairs is Chinese and going to school here. The couple next door, or the old lady next door, is from Eritrea, but she oftentimes has her kids and her folks and grandkids visiting her and all along those lines. But this is a affordable area for her, whereas other places wouldn't be as affordable. So I'm trying to figure out what our solution is when there are these disparities of ways that people are dealing with. Because I've had friends even here that couldn't afford some of the apartments that are considered more affordable. I mentioned the lady that was in Section 8 housing, and she was having a problem. So what would you do with that disparity?
So
Rick,
I have
listen.
some impractical ideas that will be practical eventually. My sister came out here like 18 years ago, and she's going to build a new life here. She was going to get her law license for California, and then she started shopping for apartments, and I went with her to some, and they were all shitholes for $2,000 a month, and now they'd be $3,000 a month, and it freaked her out, and she went back to New Mexico. And so there has to be a way to make shitty apartments more livable. Like,
But Rick, part of the problem with that is transportation. Like, you can get some affordable housing here, and you can try to push people out into what we consider the suburbs or the country area. But I can tell you that in this area, and it's the same in New York and other places, like if you push them to New Jersey, how do they get from their New Jersey apartment that is more affordable to their New York job, which is the better paying job, if there's not improvements in our transportation system? So I think that there got to be improvements.
What happens in San Francisco is, all the rich people ate everything up. People have to live there even with decent incomes of like 120,000. You're living 6 people to an apartment, so you're close enough to your work, and everybody's got some little cubicle in the apartment. We need like furnishings that make crappy spaces more livable. IKEA kind of does it, because you can buy, and Target does it. You can buy furniture that looks pretty decent. It may not last for more than 5 years, but it makes your place, you put it together yourself, and I bet you with AI and tech, we could start making stuff that makes crappy spaces feel a little less crappy.
I
Yes,
would
Sasha.
recommend to look into placing people who are challenged by paying for their own apartment. Something would resemble army barracks, where there would be a huge space with beds, and there could be like 60, 80 people stayed in one barracks until such time as they will get well-paying jobs and they will go out on their own and maybe rent something back. And if it doesn't work out, they will come back to the barrack and will stay there until such time as they can afford to stay on their own.
So
Hold on a second, Rick. In Durham, at least, they call that kind of like the temporary housing that a lot of the people run and everything. I think there's a rescue mission here, and a number of people live in that kind of environment that you are describing. But even that comes back to bureaucracy, because it's my understanding that they have to be out by a certain hour, whether they're working or not working, and then they have to be back in by a certain hour as well. So there are certain regulations that not everybody, and particularly some of those that have mental issues, are willing to always follow and everything.
So I think you had answered part of your question when you asked the question. One of the biggest things that could help is an improvement in the mass transit.
Right.
Because the big thing is when you're talking about a distance between places, you've got to have some type of way to get from point A to point B. These individuals are not going to be able to have cars. They can't afford the home. So how are they going to afford a car and transportation? So mass transit is one big plus. Then when you start looking at when you start talking about dormitories and everything else, that brings up memories of the company that was in, I guess, Japan or China that was making all the different.
Foxconn.
Exactly. You know what they had outside of Foxconn that had actually had dormitories on the inside, so people
Nets.
can leave. They had suicide nets, so that creates a problem. If you go in, you know, two flavors, or not necessarily a little bit.
Your voice is doing something.
So I would say mass transit's your huge thing. Yes, income and that income disparity in the housing that can improve as long as job opportunities improve. Mass transit improves, improving the area. There are other entities that come in to try and offer services such as mental health services and so on and so forth. Just things because it's not as simple as we're trying to make it. It's a very complex thing that's going to be able to bridge that gap in that disparity where you're living.
Yeah, Adam, we're talking about housing and everything just really quickly because I want to divert it, but not totally divert it. One of the things we've been talking about in this show is how we're doing in terms of rescue aid and aid, because I know a couple of times Kim's been here. She talked about what's going on in the mountains. Actually, earlier today, I had a meeting and actually met a young lady. Hopefully, she'll be on one of our shows, maybe mine next week and everything, that literally came from Asheville. She showed me a trailer that was literally underwater, and all along those lines, like literally the top of the trailer is what you could see and all in that space. So there is some serious damages going there as well. But one thing that she brought up, which I found quite interesting, was that they're concerned about people that are wanting to help coming into that area, because she was even offered to come back to her hometown to help, but they don't want people to interfere with people that are trained in that kind of emergency. So there actually are, because I think one of our shows we mentioned is pushing people away that want to help because they want them to be seasoned experts right now. Later on, when things are a little bit calmer, they may let people come in to help, but right now they're concerned of letting just anybody come in to help. They'd rather have the experts that know what they are doing in those venues and all along those lines. So she shared that because she actually had volunteered and wanted to go back to home, and they were like, no, we don't need you right now. We'll tell you when you're able to come back, and she may share more of that on our upcoming show when we have her, which will probably be sometime next week.
Adam, you got anything?
Anything about housing?
Housing.
You're on mute.
You may be muted, Adam.
Yeah, can't speak on housing.
Well, I'm not an expert on the housing crisis. The only thing I'll say is that for the average young person in places like New Jersey, for example, where I come from, housing is completely unaffordable. When I was back in New Jersey last week visiting my mother, I found the perfect house in my hometown that I would love to buy. And how much was it? $996,000 for 3,000 square feet.
Did you write
What
a
I would
check?
yeah, I wish I could. What I would advise young people to do is to focus not so much on what they can't control, but focus on what they can control. Get an education, save your money, don't get pregnant, and don't commit crime. Eventually, and be financially responsible and financially literate. If you do that, you will, at some point, sooner rather than later, be in the middle class. So those are 5 important factors that can help mitigate from what is a crisis that hopefully will be alleviated in the coming years.
Yeah, as I see, my thinking is that we should have government policy in favor of building more homes, and unfortunately, we don't. We're building silicon chips so that Jatovy can run his games faster. We're giving people internet for all, so the guy in Hayes, Kansas, can get internet. So unfortunately, this administration is throwing money away on garbage, like charging stations all over the desert. That doesn't help anybody.
Nick, you know what I'd recommend?
What?
I would recommend building very small but nice homes that you can
actually, Elon Musk has come out with the box. If you've ever seen it, it's basically a box, and it costs $10,000. It can be put on almost any lot.
Him mentioned that last night.
Self-sustaining. Did you see that? Yeah. And so the thing is, we need to move to policies like that, Adam, and have a lot of boxes out there so that people don't have to be homeless in California. And frankly, we got to get over that they have the right to live in Southern California. They don't have the right to live in Southern California because it is unaffordable. Instead, they have to live in the deserts of New Mexico or Arizona, where the land is cheap.
I do agree with that policy, Nick. I think you're
Hold on
right.
a second, man. I gotta pause on that because I know y'all mentioned the box yesterday, and the box sounds like a wonderful idea and everything. But I can tell you because I've got friends that have done this that box notion has been out there for a while because there are storage units throughout the America and everything. And I know for a fact people that have literally sometimes they've been cheating. Let's be honest about it, but they have literally stored their stuff in those storage units, and sometimes they have stored themselves in the storage units as well. It's not legal. It's not what you're supposed to be doing, but there are people that have done that. I know that Jacoby and other people, you've probably even seen that, Rick, as well, because I know it's done in California. So there are people that have been.
It's all over London. London has a bunch of like commercial centers that are built out of storage units.
Right, exactly.
So, okay, there's a surplus, I'll go quick, of retail space and office space, but it costs a ton to convert that to living space. That's not feasible unless you figure out a way for people to live, because commercial buildings, office buildings, they don't have plumbing for every little space. They have a central core where the bathrooms and the kitchen is. And so if you could figure out a way to divvy those floors up into living spaces and still give people access.
Rick, you could use the tax code to do that real simply. If you have office space, you charge them $10 per square foot to maintain office space, whether it's empty or full. And then if they have residential space, you don't charge anything per square foot. So the state and local governments could use the tax code to push these empty buildings into converting into residential as opposed to empty commercial space. Unfortunately, again, neither candidate from either party has brought.
Neither candidate is doing that.
Rick, can I ask you a question?
Okay.
I rent a lot of spaces. I'm in one of my
Just
offices.
wanted to interject real quick.
Sure, go ahead.
As Mark pointed out, the box units have been around forever. This is the beauty of Elon Musk, is that he is a salesman. He didn't come up with the box units. He bought another company that actually had the box units. So therefore, those box units are being promoted because it has Elon Musk tied to it.
Right.
So they've been 3D printing homes. All this stuff has all been out there. But, until we decide that we want to help the homeless in that manner, it's not going to take off. In terms of the chips and the internet, honestly, that is the future. As much as you are against it, that is the future. The next big battlefield, or actually the current big battlefield right now, because of the advancements in technology, as much as you don't want to agree with it, is power. It's the battery, because of the fact that due to AI and Bitcoin and all these other things, it takes a massive amount of power. Hence the reason why Google, hence the reason why Apple, hence the reason why Microsoft are buying nuclear power plants. So they need a massive amount of power to actually be able to utilize these services and take the lead in these markets. Hence the reason, again, the chips and the internet are very important, because all these businesses are using these services.
Let me respond to this, Mark. Let me respond to this, because
before you respond, I was going to add something before you respond to that response. Hold on a second before you respond, because I was just going to add a little sneaky thing in there as well, because I don't know if y'all noticed this or not, but one thing that even Sasha sometimes argues against when he argues against crypto and everything, but part of crypto is the blockchain. If you paid attention to that debate that went on yesterday, and we all have pan part of the debate, the voting was actually done by blockchain. They even made a point of that, because Nexus is actually a blockchain company, the company that was kind of conducting the vote. So blockchain might be more out there than we want to admit, kind of to what Jacoby was saying as well. So blockchain is also out there as part of this new wave of.
Adam had a question.
Let me respond to Jacoby, because Jacoby and I do agree. It's every now and then a progressive and a very intelligent person will agree. I agree that chips are very important, but it's not the government to pay for it. But since you do want the government to pay for it, I would propose a technology tax, so that we tax our friends at Facebook, we tax our friends at Google. We tax our friends at NVIDIA. We
No,
give them we
absolutely
tax them all to pay for Jatovi's
So,
wonderful dream. But please do not tax me.
so
Okay,
Nick,
I am not interested. So
Nick,
we do
I'll
a
do you-
technology tax, and then you can do what you want.
I will
Thank
do
you,
you one
Counselor.
even better, because what's going to happen right now, dealing with EVs, as EVs come along, you know what begins to disappear? That's the gas tax. Because once you take away that gas tax, you know what gas tax does? Gas tax actually fixes the roads, fixes bridges, and a whole bunch of other things. So once that disappears out of utilizing more EVs, and that begins to dwindle, hence the reason why we're having so many problems on the actual infrastructure market is because not because of EVs at this moment, but because we cut so many taxes and avoided dealing with the infrastructure in the first place. But as gas tax begins to disappear, we're actually going to have to recoup that cost. And that's where we're going to have to begin to tax some of the power consumption dealing with EV vehicles. And we're going to have to deal with the power consumption that's going to come through with these nuclear power plants from Google, Microsoft, and Apple, dealing with AI, dealing with crypto, because crypto, again, all these companies are jumping into crypto, especially NVIDIA. NVIDIA it was found out a long time ago when crypto started coming out that the actual card itself was that GPU was one of the best GPUs to use to break down the crypto market. So we're going to have to figure out some way to recoup those costs that are going to be lost. So I have no issue with trying to come up with some type of taxation to deal with that, and a progressive way of a taxation system, because right now we've chopped the cost on dealing with all corporate taxes and all this other stuff. We've taken away money.
Toby, I think Adam had a question.
Yeah,
I also saw him packing up.
Adam.
He's got class. So Adam, you had a question for us?
So Rick, one of the problems I have with government policy is that it's always trying to fix a problem rather than fix the root cause of that problem. When I lived in Indiana for 4 years, I saw people 18 to 24 dropping out of high school, getting pregnant, having multiple kids, being in poverty, and it created this cycle of poverty for a largely white population that they can't get out of. So my question is, wouldn't it be a good idea to say, give people a $10,000 tax credit if they graduate high school? Give them a $10,000 tax credit if they don't commit crime. Give them a $10,000 tax credit if they don't get pregnant before they're 25. Give them a $10,000 tax credit for incentivizing behavior that's going to, from the ground up, create a more responsible society and therefore require less government involvement.
I have no problem with that. If it's, I mean, you got to do a little bit of research.
Obesity.
Yeah, I mean, we got to try something. And sure, you might want to do a little research, but if the research takes 5 years, then maybe you don't do the freaking research. Maybe you just try it.
What you're talking about is being proactive rather than being reactive, which our government is. Completely agree. We have a problem with that. But yes, I completely agree with Rick, is we need to do studies and more information on that. One of the big things that we don't do and we tend to cut out of in terms of our proactive ability is we attack the education system. We already know that proactively, if we fund education, we get the biggest return. But we always tend to cut education first and throw it into military and something else. Our sciences are falling behind because we are so reactive. We didn't do the space program until Russia sent Sputnik out. So when we do these things, I completely agree. We are a very reactive government, but we need to be more proactive in education, big time.
Sasha, thank you.
Than me.
We've discussed previously a situation where housing crisis and immigration, you were trying to package into some kind of a super package that would solve those problems. There is a third problem that could become a part of that package, but you have to be really innovative and know history a little bit. Now, the third is demographics, where there are not enough children are being born. And Adam, I think you said correctly that there should be some incentives for people to have more children, although after 25, not before 25. Now, here is an idea. If you read Karl Marx, Adam, I'm pretty sure you read Karl Marx a lot. And you would also look at theory and practice of implementing Marx's doctrine in Russia in the first few years after the revolution of 1917. So they came up with the idea that the family is a bourgeois form of existence which has nothing to do with the needs of proletarians. So therefore, family is a bourgeois norm, it's redundant, and it has to be liquidated. So what comes in place of family? Very simple thing. It's a communal living. They had a giant apartments where they could have as many as 50, sometimes even 100 people living under the same roof, equal number of men and women, and they would all working together. They would bring their kids together. It wasn't clear, for example, if a girl has a baby, it was very unclear who was the father of the baby. But it doesn't matter, the baby is a baby. So you solve your demographics issue, you solve the housing issue, and now you can bring millions of immigrants, as long as they would agree, at least for a number of years, say 3-5 years, to live in communal environment, and they
Well,
will
Sasha,
multiply and care for themselves.
isn't the best way to manipulate behavior to use money? I mean, we talk about abortion a lot on this show. Here's my approach to abortion. Offer a $50,000 tax credit to any female who does not get pregnant before the age of 27. That's going to incentivize safer sex practices. Why not use money to influence behavior in a manner that leads to healthier outcomes, a more prosperous society, and less poverty?
There is one problem: that girl can have a child somewhere out of people, her neighbors, knowing about
But
that.
millions of people are getting pregnant when they cannot afford it, and they're creating a cycle of poverty for their children and for future generations. Incentivize good behavior by giving tax credits.
When
So
people
you
get
gotta-
pregnant, they don't think about affordability issue. They
So you got
just
to watch out
get
for
pregnant. Affordability comes later.
You
All
gotta
right,
watch
Rick, what are your
out for-
thoughts?
hold on. You got to watch out for unintended consequences. Conservatives like to talk about how welfare destroyed black families because there was no incentive under the 1960s, 1970s welfare system. Now, I don't know that I buy this entirely, but that there was no incentive for families to stay together. And so the welfare system needed to be tweaked to avoid that.
So
So let me ask you this, Rick. We have a healthcare crisis in this country. So my question is, instead of having, reactive medicine, why don't we say you get a $5,000 tax credit every year if your cholesterol is under 200? You get a $10,000 tax credit if your blood pressure is under 125 over 80. I mean, why can't we use that to create
Okay,
a
so
more responsible society?
I'm a little skeptical of behavioral solutions. When you look at, we have a solution now. We have Ozempic, which is a shot you get that makes you skinny over the
They
course of
still
a
keep
year.
eating donuts.
let me just to jump in real quick. I think you're targeting your question at the wrong place. One, let me point out a quick thing because I have to push back on this a little bit. Yes, it became a big target of black families. It became a stereotype, which oddly enough, there are more white people on welfare than anything, but it became the whole push that, black welfare queens that came out with, if I'm correct, it was Bob Dole that started that.
I feel like it was Reagan.
It was Reagan.
Others.
Because I thought Reagan, but either way, yeah. So the whole welfare queens, that became a whole push and so on and so forth. Also, the abortion thing, trying to say that it's just a woman's fault that a woman got pregnant. Why can't we push back on men? Why do we always have to say that it's the woman's fault? Because men are the ones who also are the ones that are committing the rapes, also having the multiple pregnancies by multiple women. A woman can only get pregnant roughly about once a year, twice even, but a man can have a baby with pretty much multiple women, so you have a problem there. I mean,
Right.
about
Right.
that. So
Right, but
we're-
that's why I want to give the money to women.
No, but we're targeting the women when you're not even thinking about the men. That's the problem.
Why is that a problem?
I just pointed out a fact that a woman can only get pregnant roughly about 1 to 2 times a year, right? A man can get multiple women pregnant at the same time. So the
True.
problem isn't the woman, the problem is the man in that situation. But you went back and said, yes, let's just focus on the women. No, that is the problem. We have to get out of that patriarchy that we continue to live in and honestly look at, hey, let's have an equal playing field. Let's so on and so forth. So there are issues with abortion that we can dive into later. But in terms of in terms of it's actually analogous to what I'm trying to point out to you in a sense. You're talking about obesity. Well, if you look at our reactive actions in medicine, all the money and finances and all that's there for if there is a problem, but none of that money is there to prevent that problem. It's because you can make a ton of money. As we point out, Ozempic can make a ton of money. But what about that doctor who just actually got this individual off of that by pointing out a nice eating plan or nutrition plan that individual can deal with, and they never even have to go to Ozempic? Or what happened to those prescriptions? So when you're targeting your things, you keep targeting individuals when these individuals are being inundated with sugary drinks. That individual doesn't deal in the sugary drink area, but the company does. Why not target those companies?
Okay, so that's a good point. But when I was saying about the abortion thing, I was targeting women specifically because I want them to get the benefit of the tax credit. I don't want the men to get it. Men make on average more money than women do. Let's use this tax credit to help women rather than help men.
So even in that situation, even in that analogous situation or that discussion point, you're still putting the flaws and pregnancy and the problem that, abortions and all this other stuff on women as if they're at fault. So why not allow those families and all that other stuff? Tax credits are just fine, which is what's being offered. That's a great thing. So help with the family if they decide to, because there are some women that don't want to have a family and don't want to get married. They want to focus on their business just like many single men do. So they want to do the same thing that men do in the same way, but we're treating them differently because we're saying, okay, well, we're going to give you this thing to say, oh, well, even though you didn't want to have children, here, have this. That doesn't do anything. That's not changing an attitude or changing anything. Why not allow it?
What do you think?
Just really quickly, because we're going to wrap up in about a minute or two. I think Rick had
Well,
another
that's right.
story.
We got two things going on. We don't want to have abortion, and we don't have enough babies being made in America to replace the population. So you got two things you want to reconcile. I think if you want to deal with it, like you give a $1 billion prize for the first drug company that comes up with an effective, easy to use male contraceptive, something that makes the sperm swim crappy. And so,
I mean, you can do a vasectomy or have
right, but like guys
and
who
that
don't
be
like
reversed.
wear condoms, guys who want to get their, some kind of reversible thing that knocks out your sperm.
Rick, the funny thing is, we're
Why not try my solution?
Because it doesn't work. Because there's what Rick is pointing out, that people want to be able to have the ability to do what they need to do with their bodies and their medical decisions. Also,
Toby, would you pay people to not commit crime?
Listen. But what Rick is also pointing out is we have a very low count of birth. We have a low birth rate at this moment.
We're only replacing 80% of our population.
Exactly. So we need more in terms of that birth rate. So what is being offered is, if you want to, how can we provide more help for those families? Because a lot of people get deterred from actually having a family because you cannot afford not only the pregnancy, not only the actual birth, not only the child as it's born. What if that child has complications? How do you pay for all this stuff? So these tax credits, and that, if you're going to support a family, give that as an option. Don't just say, okay, well, that's gonna change your behavior by don't get pregnant. That doesn't do anything.
How does that help single parent families?
Toby, just really quickly, because we got to wrap up. Sasha, if you got any last points that you want to make, and also after you make
Very quickly,
you want to tell folks about what you're going to have on your show on tomorrow, because you got Ukraine, Russia, and China tomorrow.
Okay, first of all, let me complete for today's show discussion that immigration, most of this immigration are coming from South America. They're all countries. They all never consider to have abortions, and they will explode. They will give them enough, a little place to live, some jobs or so on. They will multiply like crazy. Each woman will produce 10 kids at least, maybe more, and that's you solve immigration problem, demographic problems, and everything else. And the American people, okay, let them live of the welfare and just for next 5-6 generations, and that's about it. Now, tomorrow program. So North Korean people came to Russia, trained and fight Ukraine. That's quite convenient for Ukrainians because the place to be
North Korea is beautiful.
Yeah, you're right, Adam. You're right, Adam. The North Koreans are tiny people, and to be with them require much less space than Russian people. So bring more North Korean people to Ukraine. They will be all accommodated very quickly. By the way, South Korea took a notice of what's happening, and they have an incredibly great army and supplies and ammunition and weapons, and all that will be supplied to Ukraine. So Ukraine is now ready to defeat Russia with help of North Korea and probably China and Iran if Iran survive Israeli attack. And we'll see what's going to happen very soon.
Sounds good. Well, we'll see that show tomorrow. We've got actually Coco getting ready to start, if she's not already started it shortly, and everything, because that's a rerun. And we've got other shows as well. So I'll see you two gentlemen.
Thank you, guys.
Tomorrow and
Good seeing you.
Conversation, and
Bye-bye.
look forward to seeing you later.